Well, let's listen in to the ceremony taking place at Paris's Place Vendôme.
For the viewers who are just tuning in, you're seeing there the Justice Minister, Eric Dupond-Moretti, who's using 100 kilogram, that is for those with imperial measurements, 220 pound seal to press from 1810 to imprint this historic amendment in France's 1958 constitution. Indeed, the country now becoming the first ever in the world to enshrine abortion rights in its constitution. It includes the phrase, the freedom of women to have recourse to an abortion which is guaranteed. And we're now waiting for President Macron to speak. Keep in mind, this is, of course, International Women's Day. It is an important day for this to occur, and the vote in the Senate having been timed in the hope that this would happen today on Friday, March the 8th.
And Annette, this is going to make a lot of headlines around the world. It already has this week after the historical vote we saw on Monday from both chambers of Parliament. Do you think other countries might follow suit?
That's the hope. But again, it comes against a backdrop of far more worry about the emergence of the far right, particularly here in Europe, and what it means for reproductive rights. The next country to watch will be Poland, because the new Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, who's taken over from the far-right Law and Justice Party, is looking at overturning those incredible harsh restrictions against reproductive rights. And I understand that there are certainly a number of people in the Polish Parliament who would be looking at what's happening today in France very closely indeed to see whether, in fact, their country could replicate this historic move. And certainly, I mean, it is amazing to think that we're 24 years into the 21st century and reproductive rights are not a given in so many countries. And if anything, as we've seen in the US, they are indeed fragile. And it depends who is in power. And so this is why enshrining it into the Constitution is protection for this nation's future generations, to ensure that women will not experience what their American counterparts are experiencing now.
Yeah, and can you play up that last bit? There were some lawmakers and some people from the public that said abortion rights weren't really called into question. The procedure wasn't at risk here in France, and that we did need to take this extra step to actually put it in the Constitution. But I think people were looking across the Atlantic and seeing that we never know what happens next, what holds the future in terms of presidential elections, who might be in power.
Absolutely, and given that the far-right politician Marine Le Pen is gaining more and more support in recent years, of course, that's the big concern. Having said that, she did vote to accept this amendment because a poll back in 2022, taken after the demise of Roe v. Wade, showed that 86% of the French public supported abortion rights. So I think electorally she understood that this is something which had the wide support of many French people and that it wouldn't serve her political campaign to make a stand against it. But you don't know who's coming after someone like Marine Le Pen, whether in fact, the right wing as we see it today in politics shifts even further right.
And that's right. So France has inscribed the guaranteed rights to abortion. Let's listen in to the French president.
Is a momentous day for our republic. The seal of the republic is sealing today a long struggle for freedom, a struggle made of tears, drama, and broken destinies of the angel makers Maryse who practices abortion in Cherbourg and was guillotined by Vichy. Destiny of women deprived of the most intimate of their choice, that to have or not a child. Destiny of these women with faces of suffering of dread, addresses, exchanges, impossible convalescence, secrets, suspicion sermons, the risk of losing everything, one's happiness and one's life. Destinies of calm young girls and women told by Simone de Beauvoir, destined with empty cupboards and filled memories of Annie Ernaux recalling abortion, its instruments, they're burning her pain. Destin of Marie-Claire Chevalier, raped at 16 and who, defended by Gilles Halimi, had to undergo the trial of Bobigny, her own, and then that of her mother, her friends. Hey, her name thrown out, her future confiscated. Destin of Catherine, Marceline, Bernadette, the 343 who dared on the front page of the Nouvel Observateur give some of their light to those who had for too long lived in the shadow of shame. Yes, for too many years, the destiny of women was sealed by others, their life captured, their freedom flouted. So faced with these suffering and this injustice, there were pioneering women, pioneering in the fight for abortion and the right to emancipation. Marie Pelletier, Céline, Lily Roussel, many others who, after the war, managed to prize their rights from the patriarchy and established as a universal right by de Gaulle in 1944 the authorization of the contraceptive pill in 1967. Men of science, enlightened humanists who knew what abortion carried by way of intimate tragedy, violence, unbearable loneliness, activists of the women's liberation movement, the movement for freedom of abortion and of Planned Parenthood, creating 1974 with Gisèle Halimi and Christiane de Rochefort, women of commitment and courage, like Simone Veil, who, supported by the Prime Minister Jacques Chirac and President Giscard d'Estaing, passed before Parliament the law making legal pregnancy termination in January 1975. How many lives were changed thanks to this historic law? How many French women, many of whom are no doubt with us today, were able to choose their life, be free? How many lives were changed by the Roudion-Touraine lives, reimbursing abortion, creating the law of hindrance and deleting the distress and extending the time period by the various health ministers? Today, it's in the steps of these combatants that we follow humbly. Enshrine in our Constitution the guaranteed freedom of having an abortion might have seemed even less necessary a few years ago, but the backtracking of our times have made it an urgency throughout the world, including in the biggest democracies, our neighbors in Europe. We're seeing the backsliding of the right to abortion, of women's right, those who deny women the right to love, to choose, to live freely. So, because the unthinkable is emerging, we needed to enshrine, to engrave the irreversible. That's why on the 8th of March, during the tribute to Gisèle Halimi, I promised to enshrine in our Constitution the freedom to have an abortion. This serpent is kept because political leaders of all parties have worked in Congo, work built by MPs, Eliane Assassi, Aurore Berger, Laurence Cohen, Mathilde Panot, Laurence Rossignol, Mélanie Vogel in particular, who called for such an initiative, work undertaken with constant determination by Elisabeth Borne and then Gabriel Attal, Prime Minister, by Éric Dupond-Moretti, Justice Minister, Bérangère Couillard, Aurore Berger, ministers in charge of gender equality, whose culmination was made possible following a dialogue initiated by this government with the National Assembly and the Senate. This day has become possible thanks to you. It's become possible also thanks to the mobilization of generations of activists, generation defending women's rights, who throughout society championed this hope. Perhaps also thanks to these young French women who converted the gaze of a father, an uncle, changed a vote, and instilled a bit of their youth in the oldest constitution in the history of the Republic. Is French he who is not tranquil as long as the promise of equality has not been kept for humankind, for the universal. Today is not the end of a story. It's the beginning of a struggle. France today has become the only country in the world whose constitution explicitly protects the right to have an abortion, whatever the circumstance. We'll only rest once this promise has been kept throughout the world. We'll conduct this struggle on our continent, in our Europe, where the reactionary forces always attack the rights of women before attacking the rights of minorities, the oppressed, and all freedom. That's why I wish the inscription of this guaranteed right to have an abortion in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. Because today in our Europe, nothing is acquired, everything must be defended. Beyond Europe, we will fight so that this right becomes universal and effective, and we will conduct this fight for all women. Several combatants are here at our side who risked and still risk their lives in their country. Women of rights where this right doesn't submitted to men to live, to dress, to choose their loves. Women of countries where this right no longer exists, where the gags, suspicion and trials have returned, will fight against obscurantism, seeking revenge, against disinformation, daily obstacles and difficulty of access for citizens, because it is a universal fight, and this fight is ours, that of women and men. And because this fight for the freedom of the body of women overrides all others, we will tirelessly act to put an end to violence, abuse affecting women, to put an end to prejudice that prevents this violence, these insults that poison. Act for these women who work more and earn less, the spirit revolted by injustice. Act for these women whose daily work, unpaid alimony, make life more difficult for them. Act because the progress of women's rights is the progress of human rights. And from this story of tragedy and tears, there remain the tears of joy, the activists that the Republic salutes with respect and gratefulness, and today see their fight almost over. A struggle whose roots run deep. These activists of women's rights may perhaps remember the first day of their commitment for the right to abortion, the tragedy, the violence that they lived through, a life deeply affected they heard about, a conversation turning into a conversion, and forever they remember that everything started on that day. Some were contemporaneous with the angel makers. Today they have become makers of possible, of freedom, of hope. Yes, Marianne, our Marianne, is that free woman who represents us all and compels us in memory for our mothers and their battle, as a itinerary for our daughters and their freedom. Once the right to abortion has become at last universal, we will remember that everything began on that day, the 8th of March 2024, where France was great because it wanted to be so for all women universally. So thank you.
Vive la République et vive la France.